Alright, hi. You've probably noticed this video looks a little different than my usual videos. I've been trying to make more joke content lately, which is why I've been showing my face more often. But here's just a video I wanted to make because I've only been seeing universal praise for Elden Ring, and I just need to get some of my honest takes off my chest. Alright, so 3 things before the video I need to quickly note so this makes sense. 1. This video is broken up into 6 parts where I talk about 6 different reasons why I think Dark Souls 3 is better than Elden Ring. I will be referring to and showing all parts of these games, so here's your spoiler warning. Alright, number 2. You're probably going to disagree with some of my takes here, which is great, and I'm excited to hear the discussion around this. But I would ask you, if your take is longer than like 1-2 paragraphs max, don't put it in the freaking comments. Just make your own audio recording and make a dumb YouTube video like I did, okay? I'm not trying to lose my eyesight reading your takes on the symbolism of the ball sacks of Radahn's horse, okay? Just make a YouTube video out of it. Thank you. Okay, number 3, the last point. Throughout this video I have footage from Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring, and even a little bit of Sekiro, and the footage doesn't necessarily emphasize the points I'm making at that time. I just wanted to throw something that you could watch and be entertained by in the background. It's not necessarily an exact representation of the points I'm making. Alright. Let's get into the video. Thanks for watching. I want to start off with one of my strongest points. Dark Souls 3 straight up has better boss fights than Elden Ring. Bosses are my absolute favorite parts of any games, and From Software has learned how to perfect boss fights, and they did in Dark Souls 3. Which in my opinion has multiple of the best boss fights of all time in it. Elden Ring just pales in comparison. Now, you could go ahead and say, well, this is just your subjective opinion, yeah, and it's a weak argument because it's all based on opinion. I say no, because I did math on it, and I hate math, and that proves that this is more legitimate than just a fairy tale opinion. I went through and scored each main boss in Elden Ring in 4 categories that all combined together. If a perfect boss existed, it would score 40 points, okay? 10 points come from boss moves and design, 10 points for the boss arena, 10 points for the boss music, and 10 points for overall fun to master gameplay. Maybe I'll make a video later showing how each boss fight ranks in the Souls games if you guys care. Elden Ring's bosses were consistently hitting a score of like 25 out of 40, which is respectable, for sure. That's good. The highest scoring boss, and therefore the best ranking boss in Elden Ring, is Godric the Grafted, with a score of 35 out of 40. That's a great boss fight. That's S tier. But he is kind of like the exception to the rule, generally speaking. Most bosses didn't break 30 points. On the other hand, Dark Souls 3 bosses are literally almost all S tier ranking, between 35 and 40 points. Don't believe me? How about we refresh some memories here? Champion Gundyr, Abyss Watchers, Pontiff Sullivan, the Dancer, the Twin Princes, Nameless King, Friede, and to top it off with a literal perfect 40 out of 40. In my opinion, the best boss fight in all of Souls, Slave Knight Gale, S tier. Okay? These are all just in Dark Souls 3, bro. And those are just the S's. There are A tiers, and to be fair, there are lower ranking bosses, like, I don't know, Deacons of the Deep, or that weird tree boss. Those are not S tiers, those are not A tier, they're lower. But let's just compare this to Elden Ring. And I know Elden Ring doesn't have its DLCs yet, which I hope will add some more S tiers. But if you just do the straight up math, Elden Ring is already far behind on the frequency of amazing boss fights in comparison to Dark Souls 3. And if you disagree with me, okay, that means that you think Rennala is S tier. Bruh. It means you think Radahn is almost a perfect boss. Okay? It means you think that the Elden Beast is on par with the Lord of Cinder. Bro! The Elden Beast is a straight 1 out of 10 in the funness score. You spend like 70% just running these great football field distances just so you can get up to him and swing your sword. Even spells, you can't do them from that far away because he just teleports. Okay? I just think it's straight up bad. And I feel like they forgot to allow you to like summon your horse in that fight. I think it's like an error. It's that bad. And I'm just trying to be brutally honest with you, okay? Most bosses in Elden Ring are good, and they are fun, but they are no Slave Knight Gale, okay? Maybe I'll make a ranking video later where I go through these individually and talk about the specifics of the 4 sections of my 40-point scoring system. But the math as it stands puts Dark Souls 3 bosses' grades ahead in most cases. And the jarring downgrading quality that I consistently notice in Elden Ring's bosses that I want to bring up right now is the boss music. I've gone through and listened to all the OSTs as I was ranking them, and so many of the major cutscene bosses, the big bosses, just fall flat. Their music has nothing memorable. It makes me think that there was a conscious decision to not make the interest too interesting for some reason. Go and listen to Melania's boss music, and then go listen to the Twin Prince's boss music, if you don't believe me. It's an inarguable downgrade in musical quality. This and other factors of the scoring system all prove that Elden Ring's bosses are good, but not on par with the great bosses of Dark Souls 3. Okay, next up is tonality. Now, the tonality of the Souls games is traditionally very dark and gritty. Dark Souls 3 is a straight up horror game at some points. That's why on Steam it could be grouped up with other easier to spot genre placeholders like, I don't know, Resident Evil or VR Chat. Just kidding. But Elden Ring doesn't have that same scare element that my favorite moments of the franchise has had. Here, there's not the dark, oppressive atmosphere that works in tonality with the gruelingly difficult combat. The areas look like this. Very pretty. But it feels less like a Souls game and more like Wizard 101. Alternatively, in Dark Souls 3, when I'm exploring the backside of the Lothar Castle, and I stumble upon an area called the Consumed King's Garden, I feel it in my gut that I'm not welcomed here, and I'm supposed to uncover something abysmally horrifying in this misty mire. Then imagine you walk through the fog wall to witness this cutscene.
You ignorant slaves. Finally taken notice, have you?
Don't you just feel your heart sinking into terror? That's what I love. Most of the areas in Dark Souls 3 follow this tonality and carve out unique and interesting bosses which fit into the grossness and the darkness of the tone. Elden Ring's world, on the other hand, I think suffers from a lack of tonality. It seems to me From Software kinda tries to make a theme of things being grand, but to me, it often just feels bland. I only felt the terror that I love so much twice in Elden Ring. Once when I fought up this hill of crazy hysterical cult ladies to be greeted with a boss called the Godskin Apostle. And there was dope music there, by the way. The second time I was presented with terror was when I explored the secret area in a castle, and I guess, long story short, I fought a giant salamander king. When he did this with his jaw, my jaw dropped. It was awesomely terrifying. None of the other areas or bosses felt as good or as memorable as these battles in these areas. Now, you could argue with me and say, hey Asher, games don't have to be scary to be good, right? I agree with you 100%. Think about like, I don't know, Super Mario Galaxy. Not exactly a horror game, but still a super solid, great game. After all, this game isn't named Dark Souls 4 or something. It's a new IP, it's Elden Ring, so it doesn't have to be scary. But you tell me this, what is the tone of Elden Ring? I don't know, Elden Ring maybe represents things aging, an aging land or something? But they really honestly don't have a solid theme that works with the gameplay. And what I'm saying is the tone of the Dark Souls, dark, fits in perfectly with its dark and oppressive combat. The enemy is scary. Guess what? It's also scary when the enemy hits you and kills you in one hit. These things fit together like two perfect puzzle pieces. Elden Ring does not have the same puzzle piece perfection. Okay, now we're going to talk about the combat. This might be the longest section, but I have a lot I want to say about it. Elden Ring's combat overall is super awesome. I'm not going to debate that. When you compare it to the vast majority of single player games out there, it honestly just stands out as one of the clear leaders in the industry, okay? I think it has great combat. I think that's one of the reasons why so many other titles and other games are slowly transforming into Souls-like combat style games. Heck, even Assassin's Creed is getting in on this. Yeah, Elden Ring has really great combat and is mostly fine for most people as they make their way through it. But with all that being said, Dark Souls 3 is better. And I really do want to note here that I think Sekiro personally takes the cake for most enjoyable combat to master, that blade to blade cutthroat katana clashing. But this video isn't about Sekiro, unfortunately. It's about Elden Ring. And here I'm discussing why Dark Souls 3's combat system is superior to Elden Ring's. And I think we'll see more discussion on this within the community as time goes on, but I'm here to discuss the two strongest points I have against ER's combat that I have noticed so easily have robbed so many people of that typical satisfaction and enjoyment that I usually do feel in Dark Souls. First, the biggest culprit is the chronic over-reliance upon ranged spells. Now, I don't think it's the player's fault if they use ranged spells to defeat bosses. Heck, the game gives you these magical tools, why not use them? It's safer, you're gonna survive more, it's easier, okay? 100% correct. Elden Ring just hands out ranged spells a little too easily and a little too much, in my opinion. And I'll give you an example as to why I think this. Because this is an open world game, you're going to be drawn to loot and to look around the area and find the best items. Hypothetically, a player could just ride around past the bosses, past the difficult people, Malekith, Godric, and snatch one of the many powerful ranged spells in this game. Maybe you watched a YouTube video that actually showed you exactly where to get it from. And there you go, you're set to defeat almost all of the hardest bosses in the game just because you have a zappy spell. Oh, Elden Ring needs an easy mode. It has one! Ranged spells. And I'm not just trying to cause hate on all magic. I just hate range magic. I wish From Software made more spells that were less about range and more just about melee. That would be awesome. Now, I played all these games both ways, melee and magic, and when using range magic, I believe that you will rob yourself out of the most satisfying and godlike combat I think you can encounter in gaming. Dark Souls 3 is a great example of a melee-heavy game in the series, which I believe sets the player up to feel these godlike thrills more often. There are spells and pyromancies in Dark Souls 3, but I think the balance of their implementation is way better done in that game than Elden Ring. Now maybe you do enjoy the easy path to victory and not getting within 100 yards of the enemy, and you think that that's fun. That's you. I'm not going to downgrade you. That's fun, okay. But I am telling you, in my experience, I've done it both ways. You get so much more of an emotional high and satisfaction when you're able to get right up into the boss's faces and you're able to confidently counter each of their moves with a well-timed dodge and a swift swing of your sword and that anticipatory step back and then javelin thrust into their gut. The difference is, Elden Ring is like listening to music. I think Dark Souls 3 is like listening to music and dancing to it. The difference is getting an A on your Spanish test, or actually being able to speak a fluent language, you know? And it's hard, I'm not going to deny that. It's hard to master something like this, where there's so much to learn and all these subtleties you gotta figure out. But it's just like climbing a mountain. If you just drive to the top, the satisfaction is robbed of you of climbing it. The view is so much more rewarding when you climb step for step. And I know I'm sounding like one of those get-good elitist D-bags you'll find online, but I'm just trying to be honest with you. I think that it's more fun when you do melee, okay? So long story short, all that crap aside, range magic equals easy mode equals less fun. Dark Souls 3 does not equal as much easy magic, which does equal more fun. That's my take on it, okay? I'd love to hear your opinion too. The second part of my general combat complaint in Elden Ring is sort of a minute subtlety, but I think the longtime players will recognize it. Elden Ring has some enemies and some bosses which actually break the combat rules of the world that have been set up. And this goes super deep behind the scenes into combat mechanics and enemy AI, and I don't feel like I can explain it nearly as well as this great YouTube video by Swagapagos Turtle called Millennia Doesn't Play by the Rules. Please go watch it so you can understand what I'm saying. This video is so clear and concise, it explains what I'm talking about so much better than I could, and I put the link in the description. Please go watch it. I'm going to try to explain a little bit of what I understand about this. But some bosses and enemies in Elden Ring simply break the unbreakable rules that the gameplay teaches us, and this is not a good thing. And I'm not just whining and saying Elden Ring's too hard. It is hard. Once again, go watch the video, it explains it. It's kind of like this. Here's an analogy. You train very hard to compete in a wrestling match. Coaches, judges, and your sparring opponents teach you the acceptable rules. And then you show up on game day to a championship fight and see that your opponent is allowed to wield a knife. It breaks the premise of the combat rules. That would be a terrible fight. And I'm not saying that if an enemy in Elden Ring pulls a knife on you, and that will happen, I'm not saying that breaks the rules. But here's an example. There's a boss in the game called Millennia, which cancels animations, steals life through shields, and can launch into the waterfall spam attack even when she's supposed to be staggered. These break the established rules of combat in this world, which is bad combat design. There's also a few undodgeable attacks from certain enemies and bosses, besides Millennia, that makes me concerned for the design of future FromSoft games. In Dark Souls 3, I believe, from my memory, as long as you timed it right, for the vast majority, almost 99% of attacks, you could dodge through them perfectly, and then counterattack. There were AoE attacks, but not that many, and you always had time to anticipate them and run away. Elden Ring has attack patterns that spam like sword swings and damage in your face instantly, which make it impossible to dodge. One of them I remember off the top of my head is Godric. He has this wind swirl attack that instantly activates if you're too close, and you don't have time to dodge it. I know Margit has an attack where he thrusts the spear out or the sword towards you, and if you dodge into it, he starts spamming all these things which are kind of impossible to dodge. They might actually be impossible. I watched a YouTube video on it. They may be impossible. Malekith in his first phase, when he's like the cleric beast looking dude. Cleric beast? Is that the wrong game? Anyway, in his first phase, he has this one double swipe thing that you can't dodge. It's too fast. You can't roll 2 times in the time that he does that double swipe. And the last example I'll talk about, Radagon, not the Elden Beast, but Radagon. He can teleport away and then teleport back as like a bolt of lightning, and then you can swing immediately into it. I think it might actually be impossible to dodge it perfectly. I could be wrong on that one though, however. I haven't tested it extensively. But there's these examples, and I know there's more, okay? Maybe in the comments you guys can point some out. I have beef with these types of attacks because I'm arguing that it actually makes these games less fun to engage with. I love trying to master these fights, these bosses, so I could have a perfect no-hit run, which is impossible to engage with certain enemies during certain attacks, like I've mentioned. Because instead of this back and forth dance I talked about, you're forced to just keep your distance from them and avoid the combat altogether. It's almost like anti-combat, and it feels artificial when it's unavoidable, and that's unfair to me, and bad. And by the way, don't try to argue with me that everything is unfair in these games, because they're not. There's probably a dozen other good video essays on YouTube explaining why the difficult in Dark Souls is challenging, but not exactly unfair. You can go look that up if you want. These are my 2 largest complaints with combat in Elden Ring. I have other gripes, but we'll leave it at this. Like my thesis of the video says, I think Dark Souls 3 already did a better job of perfecting this type of combat, and in my opinion, Elden Ring feels like a downgrade to me. Alright, this one's going to take a little bit of explaining, and I'll do my best to articulate why I feel this way. I think the feel of a linear game beats the feel of an open world game in the From Software storytelling department. Let me explain to you why. While playing through Dark Souls 3, I didn't know what the freak was going on, who I was fighting, or why I was trying to slaughter the lords of the land. For some reason, though, I was intrigued and interested in finding out why I was killing things, and I wanted to read item descriptions and listen to the NPC dialogue and pay attention during the weird freaking cutscenes. Now, Elden Ring has some of this weird, cryptic, almost optional storytelling as Dark Souls 3, but I don't actually care about any of it for some reason. Alright, looks like we're riding a glowing coffin down into a pit of scarlet rot. I don't care. Oh wow, there's this giant city underneath the land. I don't care why it's here though. It's hard to put into words why I just feel more captivated by one and not the other, but I think it has to do with the open world map of Elden Ring, which by the way, is the best open world game I've ever played, so props. But it's not as good as the more linear experience of Dark Souls 3. I think this is partially the case because in a game like Elden Ring, the open world has certain storyline beats that progress the game forward. Like, an example, when you kill Godric, this little chamber opens up behind him, and you can go into it. But then, instead of opening up a new area, it kind of just pops you back out into the land which you already could have explored. In Dark Souls 3, when you beat a boss, it unlocks the next area to explore. But in Elden Ring, you can kind of just explore anything at any time because of the freedom of being able to travel anywhere. And because Elden Ring is an open world map, you can encounter these areas and these bosses in any order you really want. And it's much harder, if you think about it from a developer's perspective, to try to tell a story when the reader can just flip to all these random pages in any order that they like. Elden Ring incentivizes you flipping to random pages, and it's a lot of fun, and it's a plus 10 for exploration, but I'm arguing that it's a minus 10 for the storyline and pacing that a well-crafted narrative could be. And now, I want to say this, I know Dark Souls 3 isn't like a strict linear game, like at an early Mario level, where you just go left to right. I know it's not like that. But Dark Souls 3 definitely channels you strongly into certain world directions, and puts you down more linear style levels that branch out. It's like a tree, it's all connected together at the roots, and you can explore different branches as they connect to each other. Elden Ring is more like a big horizontal map where dungeons and castles are spaced apart, and I guess they're kind of technically connected by this open land, but that open space doesn't necessarily move the narrative forward. I like it better when every inch of the level moves me toward a path of completion in Dark Souls 3. In Elden Ring, you are incentivized to run around and backtrack and explore in circles, but that lessens the narrative experience to me. And I'm not saying it's bad, it's just not as good, okay? PvP. Let's face it, the PvP in Elden Ring is a heap of toxic trash. There's always been broken and glitched out weapons and lag in the other Souls games, but Elden Ring takes it to a new level with the number of broken tactics at hand. I will argue that Dark Souls 3 had the most respectable and fun, thriving PvP community in its heyday. Yes, there were toxic ganker cowards. Yes, there was Estus canceling there at the end, I remember. And, I guess the most brutal PvP of all time in any game, where the invaders would hack into your computer and start stealing all your information. And all of this, with the exception of the hackers, which they're working on getting out, is still better than Elden Ring's PvP, currently. Like I've already explained to you earlier, the over-reliance upon spells in PvE, guess what? Translates to the PvP, too. And there's a lot of jank spells in this game. Do I need to talk about the Limgrave AFK farmers? Do I need to talk about the impossible to reach invasion areas? Do I need to talk about the invisible one-shot retaliation glitch? Do I need to talk about how it seems like every person is so brain dead they just constantly spam that Rivers of Blood weapon of war and hope to apply bleeding to enemies? Even though the weapon art doesn't even hit my body, it still applies a bleeding effect. It's so dumb. Do I need to talk about the bloody swarm spell everybody has, or the instant weapon of war, slice? How do you lose at PvP in Elden Ring? Use a sword. How to win at PvP? Spam your spells. Do I need to talk about how there are no covenants, which give no real in-game incentives to invade? I don't need more runes. I need more balance, okay? Hopefully in time this multiplayer aspect gets ironed out a little bit better, but I will probably not pick it up again unless they make a drastic multiplayer DLC update or something that fixes a lot of these issues in a patch or something. There's just no incentive to even go in and torture myself by playing PvP. There's no covenant spells or sick medallion prices, which would be great. I just don't need more runes to fight bosses. Because chances are, if you're good enough to beat the slimy, trickster, real people in this community, then you're probably already running circles around the AI bosses and you don't need more runes to boost your stats. Maybe I feel more let down with the PvP because the trailers and interviews made me really excited and hyped up my expectations, but I guess I wanted it to at least be as good as Dark Souls 3's, but it has unfortunately fallen flat and stale to me. On a positive note, I do think the player summons works very well against boss fights. The system where you can summon randos or your friends to help out with an area or a tough boss. And I got a fair amount of enjoyment out of that, so good job. The dual-edged sword of this system is, I don't know, maybe I just have terrible luck, but whenever I try to invade one of these groups of friendly cooperators, it always seems like it was me versus like 2 or 3 other people. And I just think this would be a much better system if they matched the number of cooperators with the number of invaders, so it was a more fair fight. But I know that's not how it was in Dark Souls 3, I know that's not how it was in other games, so I can't hold that strictly against Elden Ring, but I guess I was just hoping for improvement. These are my beefs with Elden Ring's PvP. Replayability. Now the last chapter here I want to discuss before the conclusion is the replayability in Elden Ring. Elden Ring is like eating a delicious and large egg salad sandwich. It tastes amazing in the moment, but you are thoroughly done with the idea of it when you're completed. You're not craving another serving. Dark Souls 3 is like a refreshing glass of water. It seems like I have a constant appetite for more as time goes on. Now, that is probably a terrible analogy. But what I'm trying to say is that over time, Dark Souls 3 actually drove me to replay this game over and over again because I think it's more skill-based. Elden Ring is really not skill-based as it is spell-based, and armor-based, and location of loot-based. And I've already kicked that point to the ground. I think it's self-explanatory at this point to say it's more fulfilling to me to replay a game using the skills that I've mastered rather than just like finding the OP spells, finding the OP items, and then cheesing the bosses. I also think the open world in Elden Ring accounts for the lack of draw back to the lands between. Exploring this tarnished land is enthralling the first time, but you can't rediscover an area or a boss you already know is there. It's a certain novelty the first time around, which is awesome, I love it. Dark Souls 3, for some reason, still does not feel novel to me. And maybe my gameplay style hurts me here, because I like to scour the land and look in every nook and cranny, go in every building, look through every secret for cool surprises. And we all know Elden Ring has a ginormous map, and it's possible that the developers intended you to explore different parts of this map and find different secrets on different playthroughs. But if you're like me, I gorged myself with all 16 courses of the egg salad sandwich on my first playthrough, and it tasted great. But now I don't feel like there's anything for me to go back to. I don't feel compelled in the same way I do with Dark Souls 3. Now, there's still light down the tunnel, potentially for Elden Ring's DLCs. Like I've already talked about, I would love to see a huge multiplayer renaissance in this game, where they make it more balanced and more fun, and take a look at it. That would draw me to play this game for at least a little while longer. And those are my feelings on the replayability of Elden Ring, which really is just a culmination of all the chapters, all the points I've already talked about. I think ER's strongest point in this right now is that there's so many different ways to approach this game, such a big variety of weapons. But I will argue that the sheer potential variety of playstyles doesn't necessarily make the actual combat more or less fun. The perfect point to this is Sekiro. Really, throughout the game, if you haven't played it, there's only one blade you use, and you spend the whole time mastering it, and it feels so good at the end of the game to master this one blade. Dark Souls 3, however, has struck a different sort of balance. Since its launch, I've probably gone through and beaten it like 12 or 15 times, and I'm always excited to go back and start it again so that I can end up fighting Gale at that epic boss fight at the end of the Souls series. Elden Ring, we'll see how the DLCs go, it just does not have the same replayability as Dark Souls 3 to me. Alright, you made it all the way to the end. Thanks for watching, I guess. I don't know why you stayed this long. But if you agreed with anything I said, I'd appreciate a like. If you disagreed, then you can tell me in the comments that you hate my guts and are going to murder me, which is fine too. Yeah, I guess in conclusion, I do want to say I really do love Elden Ring. It was a great game and it was certainly worth making from Software. I think I just have a couple criticisms and critiques that I'd like to see remedied in future releases. But I love the game. I recommend you play it. Dark Souls 3 is better, okay? But I'll leave you with that. Peace out. Have a good one, everybody. Take care. So long.